As we all know, there's been widespread cancellations of shows and the closure of entertainment venues across Singapore. And because of that, it has severely impacted not just people like ourselves who are performers, but thousands of Singaporeans who work behind the scenes.
That was Janice Koh, one of the co-founders of Pasar Glamour, an organization who set up the emergency relief fund for performing artists in Singapore who lost their jobs due to COVID-19.
Hello and welcome. My name is Petrina Kow, and we are your hosts for Inclusively.
It's nice to be back. I'm Laurindo Garcia.
I know it's been an interesting journey because we started, a couple of episodes in, and then, COVID-19 happened. And then we were like, okay, I think we need to take a break to see what all this is about. And then, halfway into it, we're like, oh my God, I think this is time for us to jump back in. And hence the new format, and hence us doing this live with guests and everybody. And so today is our very first episode doing that. So bear with us if we're, technically all over the shop, but we're figuring this out as we go along, which is the best way to figure things out.
So our listeners may be wondering why are we restarting right now? And after a long conversation with Petrina and I, we were really thinking about how we could contribute to the conversation as the world starts thinking about what post-COVID-19 would look like. What would that world look like? Because so many companies and organizations have responded to the pandemic by trying things that they would never dream of doing. And we thought that it would be an opportunity for all of us to reflect and consider how the lessons learned from the coronavirus could contribute to a more inclusive Asia if these new things that people or organizations are doing were sustained and scaled up.
Yeah. And of course, we decided to start the whole discussion with the lens in mind from the point of view of the arts and culture. It's something that's very close to my heart. And, thinking about what's happening in Singapore, I think we've seen, the people on West End and Broadway sort of lead the way with offering their shows online for free. And I think quite a few theatre companies and, arts venues have also started to do that here. And I think, bearing in mind a lot of our friends and artists are, at home now without jobs, but yet are finding ways to offer their work somehow, and obviously on a much more online sort of space. So today we thought we would gather a few of our friends to come and discuss what they've been doing, what they've been up to, and how they've been responding to this whole COVID-19 pandemic.
Choreographer and filmmaker Aamar Ameezy will be joining us. And to provide us with a glimpse of what could make arts and entertainment more inclusive in a post-pandemic world, we'll be speaking to Grace Lee Khoo from Access Path Productions.
We will also be hearing from one of Singapore's most recognizable jazz voices, Miss Joanna Dong, who has been doing a whole bunch of exciting things from the comfort of her own home, and she'll be filling us in on the details of that. But first, I'd like to just introduce our first guest, who is joining us from a very special place. It's one of my favorite cinemas in Singapore, the Projector. He is the general manager of the Projector, an independent cinema on Beach Road in Singapore. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Prashant Somosundram. Hi, Prashant.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for inviting me for this.
Not at all. So I'm on your mailing list, so I get your sort of offerings all the time. And I think the recent email came to me was a very special one, and it really was such a an honest offering from your team about what it means to have this community. So I guess with that in mind, could you share with us how the Projector has fared, or is responding to the crisis at the moment?
Sure. So maybe I'll just start with a bit of a background on the Projector for those who are not familiar with it. But it's a 6-year-old cinema now. It started out. We kind of found an abandoned space, old 1970s theater, which wasn't used for many years, and we actually started an Indiegogo project to partially fund this cinema. So it was already, from the community up, we started building this space. So we really had a lot of community support from the get-go, which actually allowed us to survive, in a time where everyone was kind of going online too. So for us, it was, in building this space, it was always about inclusivity and bringing people together in that space and building that kind of community energy. So it was a lot about fun and participation and stuff that you can do as a group. So when, COVID-19 hit, we were kind of, our entire space was kind of thrown out because we had built a lot of our identity around that space. So it was really an interesting time for us to then take stock and see what, if this was the reality, and it probably will be for at least 6 to 9 months. And we do run a business, so it's not a nonprofit organization as such. We have a team of 14 full-timers to feed. So I think, for us, when the closures were announced, we were kind of already planning for it because we were looking at what was happening around the world, and we had a sense that this was impending. So we were already planning for it, but the immediate part was to try and figure out a bit of a cash flow for, 1 month or so, which we were fine. And the community really came in, bought, vouchers, tote bags and stuff to help us get through the first month of closure. But I think very, very quickly, we also realized that this was going to be a bit of a longer thing. And even when we reopen, social distancing is probably going to be a permanent thing for a while. And we also saw that in China, cinemas opened and then closed again because there's a second wave and all that. So I think we had a bit of a mental switch, and we were like, okay, we need to figure out what the Projector community and the Projector will be in an online space. And how do we then try to fight for a bit of that community in a very crowded space, actually, because you have, for what we are offering, there's tons of options. And so how do we value add to this experience? So I think much of our conversations in the last 6 weeks has been around that. The good news is we've gotten our IMDA license to go into a streaming space. And then now we're working out on the tech and the licensing with all our content providers, and to figure out what we can do. And see, because it's going to be a challenge, because we will be like a pay-per-view, whereas, Netflix has this entire, slate for a very low price kind of thing. So how do you get your audience to be willing to pay X amount for a certain experience? A lot of philosophical questions, but, at least now we have the time to do it.
Yeah, and it's so, it's so heartbreaking in a way listening to this, because I think when we had that community and you're thinking about gathering, and I think what I loved most about the, even though I wasn't very much a part of it, but I just loved seeing that you guys were doing so many fun things, and right. The Projector, like there were all these different nights, so it really sort of included and brought in communities that were normally maybe not included in a cinema going experience, and do you find that this is the community that is sort of coming, that you're still sort of reaching out to and that you're still hanging on to, or have you found new audiences perhaps that were not part of the Projector experience before?
Yeah, actually, Petrina, that's a great question, because this is what we are finding now that we're being forced to go into the online space. Is actually we are reaching out to a lot of people who may not have either been able to or may not have been willing to come to the cinema. So there were, we have now families who are like, I have kids and all this. That's why I loved what you're doing, but I couldn't bring, my 2-year-old or 3-year-old there. But then now they are having access to this content. And the other thing is just, recently we've been streaming I Dream of Singapore, which is a documentary about migrant workers produced by Glenn Gui and directed by Wan Pin. So it was, and then we had a talkback session with a migrant worker and, Ethan from TWC2, which is an NGO that works with migrant workers. And usually we would do this in the cinema. And, you'll be preaching to 200 people who are probably already sensitized to the issue. But whereas now doing it on Facebook Live and having it there recorded and being available to everyone, the number of views are, far beyond what our traditional outreach methods would do. So I think it's great for us and for the work that we're trying to do in terms of platforming content and also generating conversation around this content. It's allowing us to reach people who may not have come to the cinema before. So it's actually a great opportunity for us.
And I love that because I think for a lot of the theater companies that I am close to or I've spoken to, I think initially there was a little bit of hesitance to kind of put their shows online or past productions, because a lot of the times the technical aspect of these recordings were not meant for broadcast, right? It was just archival. So there was a lot of like, oh, you're not going to get the real experience, blah, blah, blah. But I think when they eventually, so for example, I know at least for Wild Rice, when they put Emily on, they were certainly not expecting the kind of response that they got, into the hundreds of thousands of views within a couple of days. And, lots of people responding from all over the world, I mean, even people who've never really watched Singaporean theatre before suddenly were discovering it and enjoying it and really connecting to that piece of history and culture that Emily was. And it's just, I think for them, it's been quite mind-blowing, and at least for it gave a lot of hope for the other theatre companies to kind of go forth and do the same. And I think they're really doing, like, I feel like when I'm hearing from all the different theatre companies of how they're offering and what they're finding, there seems to be that kind of thread that they're finding new audiences, and they're they're able to include people that have traditionally been sort of maybe, how do we even market to this group of people? Will they even come? That kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would imagine that 5 years down the road now, we will all look back at this and see this as, a great opportunity for us in terms of how we had expanded audiences and even tried and experimented new methods and, offerings in a way. So, for the projector, we're basically looking this and let's see what we can do with this 2 months that we are practically given in a way. There are survival issues that we're addressing, but, let's see what we can do from this and come out stronger after that.
Thank you, Prashant. So I do invite you to stay on as we start thinking about what that future would look like. And it's great that you've had a chance to experiment and try different things. And we're definitely not out of the woods yet. But I want to kind of now shift the conversation as we kind of consider how a post-COVID-19 world could be more inclusive. And I want to introduce Aamar Ameezy and invite him to provide us with an artist perspective. So Ammar, you're a choreographer, you're a filmmaker as well, and I would love to hear from you about how your work or how your ability to do work has been affected by COVID-19.
All right. So I would like to correct something. I would like to prepare myself to be filmmaker to be, or filmmaker in progress, because I feel like I've not reached that level yet, but one day. Yeah. So besides doing filmmaking, I'm also teaching dance outside and conducting workshop. So when the COVID-19 actually hit Singapore, it affected me a lot in terms of financially, and also the passion to teach, the passion to share about my creativity, my passion. And it's really painful to say that, right now, it suddenly just hit me that I had to stop. And what I realized that over the past few weeks, I've seen numerous numbers of theaters, even artists coming online just to give their support and even provide their work on YouTube. And it's very amazing to see that how it affects me is that it comes to think that right now it seems to me that art is actually one of the best solution to help people, to engage people, like what filmmakers are doing, like what theater people are doing. And it's very heartwarming to see, how everyone is coming together just to give a good show, whether if they are doing podcasts or whether they're doing a show online. And because also I would like to mention that because I'm deaf, I rely heavily a lot on caption subtitles, and all these theaters are coming up with caption such as Warwise, Pandemonium, and even from other countries such as London, where they actually provide caption, and it's really so easy to watch. And like what Prashant said, that mm, reaching out to people who don't usually access to theater are now actually beginning to watch theater. And also, to be honest, as much as I don't like to watch them online, because I prefer to have the real feelings of being on theater itself and just watching the emotion coming through. It's also a good way that people are understanding that, okay, like, it doesn't have to be just live. It can be just be at home and watch all these theater performance as though you're watching a movie or Netflix at home. Yeah, and I would like also to mention about the challenges that I face in my career is that I had a lot of barriers going on through me. For example, sometimes I don't have people are not very confident in my work because they think that, oh, deaf people cannot associate with music because we can't hear, or we either like, yeah, not, music doesn't involve deafness. Yeah, because they assume that deafness is just basically you can't hear anything. So I will declare that right now actually my hearing level is severe, and maybe in I would say 10 years down the road I'll probably hear nothing. So I'm not too worried about that. I appreciate what God gonna give me. And yeah, so because of all these challenges, barriers, people tend to have a misconception that, oh, okay, I don't think you're able to do this work because of your disability. And a lot of people, whenever I'm performing, they will be really shocked, like when they got to know that, oh, you are a dancer, but then you cannot hear. How, And it, it turns sometimes it turns out to be like I look like some kind of a circus show, like a freak. That kind, like the people like, oh wow, this guy is deaf and he can dance. Look at him. Look at that. It's something amazing. So these things happen when like people are looking at their disability first instead of their talent.
And now is a busy time for dancers, right? Because online you're seeing so many people doing dance challenges and things like that. So I'm wondering how if you're actually busier now doing dance work than you were before.
Personally, for me, learning dance live online has never worked for me because, firstly, it's the music led, and I can't really hear from a speaker sound, so it's really difficult to try to keep my choreography aligned with the music. And also it's not that loud as compared to like having a speaker on studio and everything. Yeah, so I just feel right now it's very inaccessible, but it's amazing that I watch some people are still doing it and how they're able to cope. And also when you're doing live, I'm not too sure whether I'm not supposed to mirror you or not. So it's yeah, but I tried a couple dance class before. Somehow it works 50% for me. So
Right. I want to bring into the conversation Grace Lee Khoo from Access Path Productions. Welcome.
Hello.
So a couple of things have been spoken about now. I guess the new supply of arts experiences that are available online. Ammar was talking about how many of these now are available with captions or subtitles as well that perhaps were not available before. And as a person, as an arts practitioner who's also been advocating for more accessible arts in locally, what was your reaction to see all of these new options? I'm curious.
I feel like the pandemic is kind of like a portal into the future of what can be achieved if we realize how creative we can be and how there is an attitudinal shift towards being creative in overcoming obstacles. And in this case, with the influx of online content being more democratic in our access towards the arts, everybody benefits. It's not just a deaf and disabled community. And this is where I think the conversation needs to continue to deepen, that, access is for everyone, absolutely everyone. When I do disability awareness workshops across the spectrum of mainstream schools to special needs contexts to corporations, I always ask this question: how many of you watch Netflix with the captions on? Some people go like, oh, English is not my first language. It helps me when I watch it with captions on. Or someone goes like, oh, I'm getting a bit older, my hearing's going, or someone would be like, I have ADHD, so the captions actually help me focus on the plot. So, access truly for organizations, it is good business. You're widening your clientele for consumers across the spectrum of different needs. So I think it's this shift in the paradigm that we coming back to the spirit of Access Path, where we never look at disability as something that needs to be fixed. It's about, tell me what you need so that you can do the best work that you can. Tell me what are the obstacles in your way. Is it from impairments, to a lack of support, to sometimes just opportunity and education. So we look at all these barriers, and we realize that most of the time it's either environmental, infrastructure, or it's mostly attitudinal. So my hope is that, when we will emerge from this pandemic with a different mindset, that is actually, not that hard. I mean, of course, it's challenging to start, being more inclusive, going online, all the logistical and technical adjustments and adaptations that we have to make. Now, the majority, we can make that for the minority groups as well, so that everybody gets to be part of the conversation and part of, the participative experience.
So it's not just about consumption as well, right, Grace? I mean, there's also an element about how this different mindset also may open opportunities for artists with disabilities as well, because there's new ways for artists to collaborate. Well, perhaps they're not new, but I guess people are opening up to different ways of working together in a time when we are socially distancing. And for people who are faced with some challenges in terms of mobility, but have something to contribute and are makers at home or wherever they may be located, this then opens up new doors. I mean, what's your take on that? And have you seen any examples of that over the last 3 months?
I think that, so at Access Path, we work with 6 associate artists, and they span, like Ammar, he's a dancer, he's an aspiring filmmaker because he's so modest. And we have music producers, sound designers, to visual art, and of course, theater practitioners. And the thing is, because we've always worked this way, we are almost, I would say that, when you talk to a disabled artist, we are experts of disruption. There are always, barriers when it comes to mobility, when it comes to segregation of opportunities and experiences. So the pandemic is a disruptor, for sure. But then again, I feel like a lot of the people that I work with, whether it's in Singapore or across the world, we've been using this technology for a long time so that we could overcome these distances. So it's almost like we are, in a way, mentally prepared to take on this challenge. And of course, Ammar did highlight some very real, the reality of the situation as well, when physically there are some barriers that we cannot overcome. So what do we, can we pivot and go in another direction instead? Yeah, so for example, when the company did And Suddenly I Disappear, it's the first disability-led intercultural theatre performance in 2018. We opened that in the National Museum of Singapore, and then we toured the UK, opening at the South Bank. Now, when we did that, we were very sure that we were going to devote a huge part of our budget to live streaming it. And this was done in 2018, way pre-pandemic, because we were going to live stream it into the region, into Philippines, into Hong Kong, Taiwan, into places where people don't have access to the theater or can't perhaps leave the homes that they're staying in. So we did that with the intention of bridging that that gap. And well, the show has been online ever since, on the internet forever, on 2018. So now was a good time for us to then bring that out and go like, hey, this piece of work has always been there, fully captioned, with audio description as well, and it reflects the voices of the deaf and disabled community in Singapore and in the UK. It's a dialogue about difference, and the spirit of how do you deal with disruption. Yeah. So when people ask us, so in a way, I feel like we have always been preparing. And we're always continuing adapting, and we're gonna keep trying to take this opportunity and widen that conversation really, and reach even more people and tell them what is it that we're doing, and just share our practices.
Great, thank you, Grace.
Thank you so much, Grace. We were mentioning earlier about some of the theatre companies offering some of their shows online. And I think Wild Rise has actually really, has started to work with you to offer already some of their previous shows with closed captioning and, doing different types of, shows to include the various different audiences. So actually we have the artistic director of Wild Rise here with us right now, Ivan.
Everyone. Hi.
So
Hello.
Perhaps you could just very quickly tell us, when you guys decided, okay, it's time, all right, all theaters are closed, we're going to offer Emily online, like, what were you guys feeling and thinking, and were you expecting the kind of responses you did? And
I think when things started getting really dark, and the circuit breaker kicked in, and they were kind of, there was this whole sense that, we had to kind of stay home to stay safe. We did something which we've never done before, which is put our shows online. And we've never done it because it's just doesn't reflect the actual show. But it's been so surprising because, Emily has had 150,000 views globally. And Supervision now, which also features a disabled person, has a captive audience. And it's a captive audience because we're all staying at home, right? Of more than 50,000 people. But the one of the first things we did was caption, because my husband Tony is hearing impaired, and we watch Netflix with captions. And that also has been a kind of impulse for Wild Rise, because I live with a hearing impaired person. And that has to understand that, and I mean that that's how our marriage has lasted, because he doesn't hear half I say. But I think that it is a difficult thing. I must say, all kudos to our amazing team. It's taken something like 40 to 50 hours to caption a show which lasts 1 hour. And it's difficult, but it's because you have to, you never realize captions unless they're badly done. And in theatre, right, we take it for granted, but in theatre, it's an emotional experience. And so, they're sitting there, not just proofreading, but just making sure that the captions are accurate first, but also timed, and to emotion, and moments, and with punchlines. You don't want to give away the punchline before the actor says it, so everyone can enjoy the joke together. So that kind of care, but it's been so amazing. And I think we not just published it. I think the team reached out to to SADEF, Deaf Association, to all the folks that we have been working with, our interpreters, to say this is happening, and it's been a wonderful response. We're very happy about it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ivan. And I suppose, when you touched on this whole thing about, the technical aspect and the number of hours it takes to do something, I think we have an artist here who's also been kind of dealing with that in a very real way. So it gives me great pleasure to invite I think she's no stranger to Singaporeans, jazz singer and actress and host, Miss Joanna Dong. So now you are known for, packing crowds of the thousands in big stadiums or even in intimate jazz bars and venues. But that's your bread and butter, being in a room with people with music. So now that, everything is closed, how have you been dealing with it, and what have you been, up to?
The COVID-19 situation affected my work a lot earlier than maybe it did for most other people, because I think as early as February, when the pandemic hit, many clients were already saying, all our events are kind of big events. There are more than 500 people attending, so we'll probably have to cancel or postpone. So I had a bit more time and a bit more lead time than many other people in other industries to kind of think about what I was going to do with myself. And so the decision to go online and start streaming my own live performances happened kind of early, and I had a little bit more time to prepare. And so I started doing my own live stream from my living room called 姐姐 time, which means sister time. Kind of like on a weekly basis, 1 week before the circuit breaker officially took place in Singapore. And it's been a pretty steep learning curve. I've had to, learn various applications, learn how to, do things like set up my audio routed through a DAW, which means digital audio workstation. I never knew what that meant till a few weeks ago, and so it's been gratifying because, like Prashant and also like Ammar alluded to, you are reaching a wider audience. So maybe before, my typical audience size would be about 500 to 2,000 people, but now my streams can be viewed by as many as 20,000 to 30,000 views on Facebook Live, for example. That's an exponential increase in viewership. And also, like they have said, people who previously might not have, either might not have access because they either couldn't afford the tickets or they couldn't physically be present at those shows, or they're just not committed enough fans to make that distance. Going online to watch your live stream is a very low commitment way of, starting to follow a new artist and check out their work. So that has been really great, and I've been having really interesting communications with them. So before that, your audiences are faces in the crowd, and I'm sure Ivan will know this too. You look out into like a sea of darkness, and they're there. You can feel them; they breathe with you, but you don't actually know what they're thinking. Whereas on a platform like Facebook Live, for example, you literally can read their very thoughts in the comments section. So you get a much more in-depth idea of not only what they're thinking, but also who they are, because their profiles, their names are visible for you to see. You can tell if they have been back for more than one live stream, they start becoming familiar to you. All that is really nice for engagement. But the downside of it, and I think this again comes from like the very reason why you want to perform. And it's not just the number of people you reach, but the quality and the depth of that interaction. And so out of, let's say, 20 to 30,000 views, if you look at the data, and that's the other good thing about doing it on a platform, is that the data and the statistics are very easy to see, but they can also be very hard to interpret. So out of 20,000 or 30,000 views, the average view time is probably only 45 seconds per one of those numbers. And then that, to me, is like, what? That's not even one whole song, and I don't know what to make of that. Like, people are just coming in, listening to me sing like, and then they're out. And that's, to me, not the kind of quality of engagement I would like, because I do deliver, with a narrative in mind. I take, the effort to think about the subtext of the lyrics I'm singing. But if all you're hearing is 45 seconds, I don't know if you're actually, getting what I want you to get out of that experience. And so there's all of these things. And but all that said, I'm very thankful to still have this engagement. And as a result of me going online quite early, I've also then further been approached by paying clients to do streams on their behalf. And so that has generated income for me. But at the same time, it's thrown me into like a mayhem of tech frustration, because every single different streaming platform has different tech requirements. Different clients have different requests, which also mean more tech burden on me. And I'm not a tech person. That was why I became an artist in the first place, so that I could have a professional crew work for me. But now I have to do everything myself. Yesterday, I just had like this meltdown. I was throwing a childish tantrum because I was like, what do you mean? Why can't anybody help me? They were on the phone, they were online, but I had to end up doing everything myself. But that's the metaphor for life. No one can help you live your life. You gotta just do it. So yeah, I've been getting a lot of elbow grease.
Oh, honey, I feel you so much. That's like me in an Excel sheet. It's like I can't even do that. But no, absolutely. And it's almost as if you feel like you don't want the technical bit. You don't want yourself to be too good at the technical bit, because it's
I don't. Yeah. I don't want people to think that this is the new expectation going forward. And I do make a purposeful effort to make sure that my online streams are a little like less polished than my live shows. Like I purposely do not rehearse them so that they come across as spontaneous and organic, but they're not polished. And that's the point, because I still hold the hope that someday we're going back to live performances and back to the standard of performance that I would like to give my audiences.
Well, I certainly have that. So maybe I'm very, very hopeful, but I certainly feel that I think because of what we're experiencing now and we are consuming so much more content online, we are absolutely feeling what it means and what it takes to put on a live show. So whilst we are getting kind of like a little taster platter, right, of like, hey man, I never watched this kind of show before, I watch it online, yeah, not bad, interesting. But next time, if it is being offered live, I'm like, you know what, I might go try that live, and so I'm hoping that's what will happen when we eventually all get together again. But just to wrap up this discussion, I was wondering if each of you could kind of offer our listeners just one thing, just in light of what we've discussed today, that one thing that you'd like your listeners to know from your perspective. Maybe we can start with Prashant.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think something's, echoing in that how we've kind of increased accessibility of our content to, to audiences which may not come to the theater, for example. So it's great. I think for us, it's asking listeners to just share the content that we have now and just generate more awareness while we work on getting more content online. But I think just going back to Joanna's thing about this culture of convenience, I think that's also something that we need to look at in terms of people just engaging for a very short time. I think we really need to, as an audience, also have a meaningful engagement. So when you watch a movie or watch this play, try and dedicate that time, and because I think it's only fair to the artists who are putting that effort and bringing that content to you.
And how about you, Grace? What would you like our listeners to know as one thing moving forward?
That necessity is the mother of invention, of innovation. And, let's take this spirit of problem solving, of creativity, and extend it to absolutely anyone and everyone. I mean, I think this pandemic has shown that we are not no man's an island. We do need each other. Isolation and segregation is a terrible, state to be in. And unfortunately, that does happen to a lot of the members of the deaf and disabled community, and those with creative artistic talent being, shunned or falling through the cracks. And, hopefully we come out of this with this collective sense of care and duty and responsibility to really build access to all the individuals around us and find out what is it that they really need to be able to do the best that they can do.
We'd love to hear your thoughts, Ammar. What's your main takeaway, and what would you like our listeners to think about after this conversation?
I think after this whole situation has died down, I would like to have everyone to kind of like realize that, accessibility and being inclusive is really not that tough to do. It is challenging, yes, it is, but we can always overcome barriers and also I'm very well aware that theaters company or even movies, such like what Ivan has mentioned just now, that putting in caption is really a very daunting thing to do. Yes, I agree to that. But it's about time that we make all this inaccessibility or to make it like a normal thing, and that's what I think me and Grace in Access Path is trying to do. And also, sorry, just to highlight on Ivan about using the word hearing impaired. I think the correct term would be deaf, because like the deaf community actually feel that hearing impaired is a negative word and it's more of a medical term. So yeah, deaf is the correct word to use.
Thank you, Ammar. And over to you, Ivan.
Thank you, Aamar. Thank you, Aamar. I'm learning every day.
Thank you.
Yeah, my husband's deaf.
With a capital
No,
D.
but I think that I just want to say that artists are putting on a very brave front through all this. Artists actually have no kind of because our entire kind of source of living is actually an audience. This has suddenly been taken away from us, and there isn't in many ways a possibility of making a living. So if you can, if you watch a live stream, just give $5, $2, $10, $50. If you can give more, because it will help these artists to continue to do the good work that they do. I think you can feel it on every single live stream that artists are giving with their heart, and they're thinking about how to give you some joy and alleviate the anxiety and the boredom of these endless days, so that in the hope that when we finally can meet together face to face, we can really kind of share in the experience of being human. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. How about you, Joanna? Do you mind telling us what would you like us to know, like your listeners and our listeners?
Well, I echo Grace's sentiment that no man is an island, and also Ivan and Ammar's and Prashant's. I mean, I think we all notice now more than before, when we have to be physically isolated, that we cannot survive alone. We need other people. Literally, I think we often say this in theater, it takes a village. And I think right now the entire world is our village. And so that's all. I just can't wait to return to the embrace of all my friends and my colleagues. I want them to know that I cherish them now more than ever before. I will never take them ever for granted again, because I could not do this without them. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, a warm embrace is something that I think we're all looking forward to right now. And I would like to thank all of our guests, Ivan, Prashant, Ammar, Grace, and Joanne. To our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this new format. We'll definitely be continuing and improving in the weeks to come. In the meantime, please remember to like this podcast and submit a review. Feedback will definitely help us reach more people. You can subscribe to Inclusively on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
And I also encourage you to like and follow the pages of Wild Rice if you haven't, the Projector, Access Path Productions, and of course Joanna Dong's Facebook and all his social medias. But I'd like to also end off today's show with a very special offering from Joe. So we'd like you to play or at least tell us about the song that you're gonna offer to us perhaps at this time. So what is this song about, and why did you choose this for now?
This is an original lyric that I wrote many years ago. The title is Two, and the refrain goes, "It takes two, it takes me and you." But I mean, it takes two is really just, a placeholder for, it takes many, many people. It takes everybody. It takes collaboration. And so I think that's the spirit I'd like to leave, all of you with. And I hope that we can all meet in person really soon after this blows over.
Yay. Thank you so much, Joanna. And thank you for this beautiful song. And thank you to all our guests. And thanks to you for listening. My name is Petrina Kow.
And I'm Laurindo Garcia. Thank you so much.
I'm not the first, and I won't be the last to write a song about the fact it's nothing new. But I'm gonna have to reiterate, 'cause it's a point that simply must be made. It takes two before the phone goes ring-a-ding-ding. It takes two. One to listen while the other sings, 'cause one can have the whole wide world, but we'll need two to share it. It takes two. It takes me and you. It takes two to trade secrets whispered and hushed. It takes two. One spills a joke, the other mops it up with a laugh, 'cause one can get a tune to fly, but we'll need two to harmonize. It takes two. It takes me and you. Just fine being on my own. I've grown accustomed to being alone until I met you. It takes two to trade secrets whispered and hushed. It takes two. One spills a joke, the other mops it up with a laugh, 'cause one can get a tune to fly, but we'll need two to harmonize. It takes two. It takes me and you.